Welcome to the community meeting for Embee Plating's Interim Measures Workplan. My name is Ashley Alestra, and I am the Public Participation Specialist with the Department of Toxic Substances Control, which we will refer to as DTSC throughout this meeting. I want to thank you for taking the time to join us today. We sincerely wish you and your families are keeping well and safe. This meeting is being recorded, and by joining, you agree to be recorded. The meeting is scheduled from 6 to 8 p.m. However, if we are able to go through all of the questions and answers prior to 8 p.m., we may end early. If we reach the end of the meeting and are unable to answer all of the questions, please email your questions and/or comments to Angela Turner, Angela, ANGELA Turner, TURNER @dtsc.ca.gov, which we have also dropped into the chat box below. The purpose of today's meeting is to provide information on the environmental investigation conducted at Embee, to present the proposed draft interim measures work plan, and to respond to your questions and/or comments. You may hear us refer to the draft interim measures work plan as IMW or cleanup plan throughout this meeting. Slide 2, please. Thank you. I will now go over the logistics. You are in a listen and participation role. Automatic closed captions have been turned on. If you would like to follow along with closed captions, please click on the CC button on the toolbar at the bottom of your screen. Today, we will be taking questions through the Q&A feature and raised hands, both virtual and in person. Please click on the Q&A button on the toolbar at the bottom of your screen to submit your questions. You may submit your questions or comments throughout the webinar beginning now, and we will respond to them during the Q&A session at the end of the presentation. You may send as many questions as you want. However, we do request that you send one question at a time so that we are able to respond to each one adequately. Additionally, we will not be taking questions via the chat feature. We will be taking questions via raised hands. Please wait until the end of the presentation to raise your hand. We will do our best to respond to the questions in the order that they are received. Please note that if you are joining by phone, please press *9 to raise your hand to let us know that you have a question. You will be called on and prompted to unmute yourself by pressing *6. Lastly, please note that we are hosting this meeting both in person and virtually as a hybrid platform, and we request that you bear with us if there are any time lags, longer pauses, or technical difficulties. We sincerely appreciate your patience, understanding, and cooperation in making this a successful meeting. Slide 3, please. Thank you, Angela. Let's go over today's agenda. I will first introduce our DTSC team here today, and then the DTSC team will present the following: DTSC's role, which is who we are and what we do, site history and background information, the proposed cleanup plan, also referred to as Draft Interim Measures Work Plan, or IMW, IMW implementation, followed by public participation activities and how you can participate. Finally, we will be going over DTSC contact information. Following the presentation will be our Q&A session. Slide 4, please. I will now introduce the team on this project. From California State Department of Toxic Substances Control, also referred to as DTSC, we have Shahir Haddad, PE Branch Chief. Angela Turner, PG Project Manager. Dr. C.Y. Jang, Senior Toxicologist. Jessica Anderson, Public Participation Specialist and co-host. And Jerry Dietrich, Public Participation Specialist and co-host. She is joining us virtually today. And myself, Ashley Alestra, Public Participation Specialist. I will be your host and facilitator this evening. Once again, I want to thank you all for taking the time to join us tonight. I will now invite Shahir to start the presentation on DTSC's role. Shahir?
I'm Shahir Haddad, the Branch Chief with the Department of Toxic Substances Control in the Cyber's office. What I would like to do is to briefly go over who we are and what we do in the program. And then Angela Taylor, the project manager of Embee, will discuss and present details about the current status of Embee and what are the next steps. And you please turn it on. I can see it on my screen. Okay, the Department of Toxic Substances Control is one of the agencies under the umbrella of California Environmental Protection Agency. We work with sister agencies such as the Water Board, the Air Board, for many of our projects. We coordinate with the other agencies. Our department mission is to protect the human health and the environment from toxic chemicals. We are responsible for permitting our waste management facilities. Our department is also responsible for corrective action. When there are releases at these hazardous waste management facilities, releases into the environment, these facilities are required to take corrective action. Corrective action to investigate those releases and to clean up the releases with the department oversight, as is the case for Embee. And for properties that are not facilities, if there is contamination is present, the department will require investigation and cleanup. Whether hazardous waste facilities or not, if there are releases in the environment, the department will require investigation and cleanup. What does the investigation and cleanup process entail? So you would have a better understanding of what we do. Myself and my colleagues here, did you dare decide?
It's on. You just have to switch to Zoom.
Okay, step number one, we start by assessment of a facility. We look into this, the history, operational history on the property of the facility, what hazardous substances were used, where storage, treatment, disposal, a processing, underground features, above the ground features, and we focus on those areas of concern in our investigations. Once we have a good understanding of the history of the facility, we go into the investigation phase. We target those areas of concern with our investigation, and many times the investigation process is iterative. We start by collecting data, and then the scope of work typically would expand to be able to put our hands around the contamination of the Can you hear me okay? The investigation typically is a iterative process. We keep investigating and expanding. and expanding the scope of work until we put our hands on the contamination and the boundary of contamination is better understood and defined. Once we complete the investigation and we have good understanding of the boundary of contamination, where the contaminants, what type of contaminants we have, then we move to the cleanup phase. In the case of Embee, we to a large extent completed the investigation. We are in the cleanup stage. The cleanup phase, we start by drafting the cleanup plan. The cleanup plan goes out for public review and comment. That's the subject of our meeting today. We are in the middle of our public comment period on the cleanup plan. And a lot of times the cleanup plan is also a relatively process. There are certain technologies, you implement technologies, many times they're not as effective as you expect. You can expand, enhance, or try different technologies. It's not always one-time deal. Sometimes you would have to change, modify, depending on the effectiveness of what you are implementing on the facility or on the property. With that, I'll turn it over to Angela to discuss Embee facility. Thank you.
Thank you, Shahir, and thank you everyone who came out to the meeting this evening, here in the room as well as on Zoom. If we have any remote listeners. I'm Angela Turner, and I'm the project manager with DTSC for the Embee site, as well as several other sites in the area. I'm switching over to slide 9. So this map shows several other facilities that I've come out to the Delhi Center to talk with folks about and provide updates. And this evening, I'm focused on Embee plating, which you can see up here in the, where's my little pointer? Laser pointer, here we go. Oh, sorry. Over here in the yellow, in the upper right-hand area of the map, it's outlined in this yellow color. It's identified Embee plating. So we have a draft cleanup plan, and part of our cleanup plan approval process is to bring the plan out to the community to give you an update on what we're doing and accept comments and answer any questions that you might have. So that's really what we're focused on this evening. So I'm switching to slide 10. Here's the location of the Embee site. I just zoomed in a little bit so you can see the light colored outline on the map. And it's a 5.2 acre complex that contains a total of 11 buildings. And it is north of Warner Avenue, that's visible down here at the bottom. And it's at the north end of the Hathaway cul-de-sac, which is here down below. It's surrounded on all sides by other commercial and industrial facilities. The closest residences are over here across Standard Avenue to the west, about 650 feet away. And the buildings that are our primary focus are 2144 and 2148 South Hathaway, and then 2139 and 2150 Santa Fe. And those are the ones that have the red boxes. Those are the buildings where painting, cadmium and nickel plating, chromium plating, and anodizing have been done over the years. Okay, moving on to slide 11. The site has been operated by Embee and its predecessor since the 1960s. Before that, it was agricultural land. And the site came to the attention of DTSC in 2001 when an adjacent property owner was doing a groundwater investigation, and their samples had hexavalent chromium in them. Hexavalent chromium is a chemical that is associated with plating operations. So they brought that information to DTSC. We did a site inspection and a records review and felt that a corrective action was indicated. So we entered into a corrective action consent agreement with Embee back in 2001. And that agreement was later updated in 2012 to add additional work. Okay, slide 12. So a little bit of history. In 2004, the Embee's contractors completed a facility investigation that found hexavalent chromium and fluorinated volatile organic compounds I'll refer to those as VOCs for the rest of the presentation. In the subsurface beneath the buildings, the same buildings that were shown in red on the previous slide. And those were the buildings where the VOCs were used and stored for the plating operations in vapor degreasers that treated metals before coating. So the 2004 investigation began that iterative process of investigation that Shahir mentioned, where we did some sampling and based on the results, stepped out, maybe went deeper and continued that process. And then as issues with potential health risks were identified, we would take interim measures to make sure that there aren't any short-term risks while that long-term solution gets evaluated. So an interim measure is used to control threats to human health and the environment and to prevent and/or spread or minimize the spread of contamination while those long-term corrective actions get developed. So based on all of the data, I'm moving on to slide 13. Based on all of the soil data that we've gathered so far, this is the extent of the soil contamination beneath 2139 Santa Fe and 2148 South Hathaway. The darkest color that you can see in the core of these shapes means more than 100,000 micrograms of total combined VOCs per kilogram of soil. And these areas are centered on these lighter color shapes here that are green rectangles. Those are represent degreasers. And then, did I skip something on the previous slide? Oh, I did. I'm sorry. I'm going to go back to slide 12. I talked about interim measures and what they are, but I didn't mention the interim measures that have been completed so far, so I apologize for that. In 2009, the first interim action was approved, which was a groundwater treatment program that involved injecting vegetable oil, microbes, and some nutrients into the subsurface in order to feed and nurture the naturally occurring microbes that exist in the soil so that they can break down those VOCs into little bits that are less toxic. And then in 2018, there was another interim measure that was approved that was based on some indoor air samples that were collected. And so the interim measure was to perform a sealing of the floor to prevent the VOCs in the subsurface from going into the gas phase and then infiltrating into the building spaces through cracks in the foundation. So there were repairs of all the cracks and seams in the floor, and then installation of air treatment units that take indoor air and they run it through carbon to scrub out all the VOCs. And then there's periodic sampling to verify that they're working properly and the levels are nice and safe. So now I'm going to move back to slide 13. So you can see up here in the northern building, this shape here that's identified with floor seal. That's the area where that floor sealing was done and where the indoor air samples are collected to make sure that the workers there are not exposed to VOCs. And these pink wells around on the down gradient side, groundwater flows to the south-southwest, are the injection locations for the vegetable oil and microbial amendments. So those are the interim measures that have happened so far. So we're here with another interim measures work plan, which has a goal of preventing exposures on site as well as on adjacent properties, to remove the chemicals from the soil and from the groundwater, and to do this in a way that minimizes the amount of waste that gets generated, interruption of business activities, and cost. So, oh, that was slide 14. If I didn't mention that, Jerry, I apologize. So now I'm going to move on to slide 15. So we evaluated several different alternatives, which is a standard part of the cleanup plan process, the first option is always no action. And that is just a baseline, which serves as a point of comparison to all of the other options. The second was excavation and offsite disposal. So the amount of soil that needs to get treated wouldn't be accessible because of the buildings that are in the way and the depths that need to get would need to get removed. So it would generate a ton of waste. It'd be very costly. So that alternative was not retained. The third alternative was multi-phase extraction. So that is when we use vapor or extraction equipment to remove soil vapor and groundwater at the same time. We didn't think that one would be effective based on there are some really clayey soils in the area that are not conductive for air and groundwater to flow through. So we didn't think that we would get thorough coverage of the whole area that needs treated using that method. So that one was not retained. The fourth one is in situ, enhanced in situ. In situ just means in place, bio remediation. And that is where we would take a food source and nutrients and put them in the subsurface to facilitate the organisms. Now, this is the interim measure that we have is already in place, which has had some success, but because of those clayey soils, it's hard to get the amendments through the whole subsurface and the whole area that needs to get treated. So we wanted to add alternative number 5, which is in situ, again, in place, thermal remediation, thermal referring to heat. And so this is where heat is used to transfer the VOCs into the air and then capture them using soil vapor extraction. So it can be applied to both the soil and the groundwater. It works well in clayey soils, and it generates a lot less waste than the excavation option. It can reach the depths that we need to, and it can treat the soil under buildings as well. So that was the alternative that ended up winning the analysis based on effectiveness, implementability, and cost. So moving on to slide 16. So how the in situ thermal remediation works is that the contractor will install electrodes into the ground that introduce electricity. Now, soil is a bad conductor of electricity, so it heats up, and that's what generates the heat that transfers the VOCs into the gas phase. So then I say we, I'm not doing the work. The contractor will capture the steam and vapor and then treat that waste stream. Moving on to slide 17. So this is a diagram that shows how that process works. So power will be brought in from the local utility, just from the grid, and then it'll get delivered to this equipment closure. That power will go through these white conduits to the electrode wells, and these are installed with the electrode at the bottom and then the vapor extraction at the top. So they apply their current, and the red area represents the area that has the increased temperatures where those VOCs are getting transferred into the air, which is getting represented by this kind of green cloudy stuff. And so then the extraction wells here will capture that gas and bring it through these green conduits at the surface over to the treatment system. So that treatment system will take this warm, moist air and cool it. So a lot of moisture will come out as water. That will go through a carbon filter and then get discharged to the sewer. Then the dry air will go through an air treatment system where it will go through a different kind of carbon. Same kind of carbon, but it's a different shape. And then get discharged to the atmosphere. So the water discharge happens under a permit with Orange County Sanitation. So Orange County Sanitation will dictate a schedule of sampling that has to be done to maintain compliance with that permit. And then South Coast Air Quality Management District will do the same thing for the air waste stream. There's a whole protocol for how often and what kind of testing needs to get done so that we make sure that we're not just taking contamination that's in the ground and then putting it in the air, because that doesn't make sense. Okay, so I think that was everything I wanted to say on that slide. Moving on to number 18. So this is a site plan of how this system will be installed at the Embee location. And some of these well locations look like dots, and those are going to be installed just vertically with a drill rig. And some of them look like lines, and that's because those are going to be installed at an angle in order to get underneath this building. So the drill rig will set up along this little line of boxes on the south end on the south side of the building, and then angle the mast of the rig so that as it gets driven into the subsurface, it goes underneath the building, and those electrodes can treat the soil that wouldn't be accessible by an option like excavation. And then some of these little blue dots in here that you can see in the interior, those will be installed by hand with equipment that looks kind of like a post hole digger, because there is a lot of equipment in this building that is like huge and integrated into the structure of the building, and it can't just get moved out. So the wells will get installed over the course of about 2 months. The work would happen in normal business hours, Monday through Friday for all of the exterior wells, and the few that are inside will probably be installed on a weekend in order to minimize disruption to the business. So you can, they'll operate for about probably 6 to 8 months. The contractor who designed the system has calculated, based on the amount of chemical that's in the ground, how much energy is going to be required to treat it. So once they get to about 60 to 70% of that amount of energy, they'll start sampling to take confirmation samples and see how everything is going. And so at some electrodes, it'll likely be clean. Maybe those can get turned off, and then others still need some more treatment. Those stay on. They continue that process until the goals are met at all the sites, and then the whole system would get turned off, and then we'd monitor rebound. And so that verification happens with soil sampling and with groundwater sampling to make sure that the goals are met. So moving on to slide number 19. So there's some safety measures that will be used during this process. There is indoor sampling happening in the areas that are over these contaminated areas to make sure that the VOCs that are getting transferred into the air aren't coming into the building. There is also soil vapor sampling in soil vapor probes that are located around the perimeter of the treatment area so that we can make sure that we're not doing anything to increase its lateral spread. The waste that get generated will include soil, which will get sampled to determine whether it's hazardous or non-hazardous, and it would go under manifest to a facility that's permitted for that. And then the air and water will get discharged to the atmosphere and to the sewer based on the conditions of the permits that I mentioned a moment ago. In terms of the equipment itself, it has interlocks that will turn off the electrodes if the vapor recovery is interrupted. So in case that air isn't getting captured, we don't want to volatilize more and then not have a place for it to go other than inside the building. And then if that happens, then the contractor staff would get alerted with a text and email message in real time so that they know that they need to come out and check on the system. If there is a security breach, like somebody comes in to do some copper theft or something like that, the electrodes will turn off. The vapor recovery system will remain on for safety. A compound is going to be located inside of the secure perimeter of the Embee facility, and it will also have like motion sensors and cameras so that if there is an alarm that that can get addressed by security staff, because we want to make sure that nobody gets hurt. Let's see, slide 20. So in terms of traffic control, you can probably expect about 2 to 4 trucks for a couple of months during the installation of the wells. And then at the end of the process, when the wells are no longer needed, it'll probably take a month or two to abandon them. But that would be a pretty small portion of the truck traffic that's already out there in this industrial area, so you probably won't notice. The drilling equipment is noisy, but it's not during evening hours. And I think by the far enough away as the nearest residence, you're not going to hear it. The neighboring businesses will probably hear it if they're outside. Inside their businesses, they probably won't. The equipment that will be running for the whole 6 to 8 months is installed in a sound reducing enclosure. So you'll have to be pretty close to it to actually hear that. If you're at the property line of the facility, you will probably not hear that either. Moving on to slide 21. So I guess we're at public participation activities. So I just wanted to invite you, if you have any questions or comments or concerns about the cleanup plan in particular. We have this 30-day comment period where we're accepting those comments, and they become part of the record where we address them in a responsiveness summary that becomes part of the approval of the final document. If any changes are necessary to address those, then this is the time when we would make those. But also outside of that, if you have any questions about this site that are not related to the cleanup plan or to the other sites, I'm always available if you want to give me a call or an email.
Thank you, Angela. I appreciate it. Now I will give a brief overview of the public participation activities conducted on this project. Slide 22, please. In September 2023, 1,486 community surveys were sent out to community members, approximately a quarter-mile radius away from the cleanup site parcel, including Embee and other cleanup sites. In October through November 2023, 81 survey responses were received, including 49 comments. A community profile was created and, in summary, is compiled of a project overview, community survey results, and both recommended and required public participation activities. This community profile was placed in 2 physical locations, and an electronic copy is available online. We will go over the location of the information repositories shortly. Slide 23, please. In April 2024, 827 community updates were emailed and mailed to community members approximately a quarter-mile radius from Embee. The public notice was published in English to the Orange County Register and in Spanish to the Excelsior Orange County edition. The purpose of the community update and public notice were to inform community members regarding project information and to announce the public comment period and this evening's community meeting. Slide 24, please. To view the electronic copy of the community profile, draft IMW, and for further information on this project, please visit DTSC's Envirostore database at https://www.envirostore.dtsc.ca.gov/public/profile_report.asp?global_ID equals 303-40013 and my tab equals activities, which we have also dropped into the chat box. You can also view the community profile, draft IMW, and other project-related documents in person at the DTSC Cypress Regional Office in the file room, located at 5796 Corporate Avenue, Cypress, California, 90630. Please call 714-484-5400 for an appointment to review these documents. Information is also available for in-person review here at the Delhi Center, located at 505 East Central Avenue, Santa Ana, California, 92707. Their contact number is 714-481-6900. Slide 25, please. We want to thank our community members for staying engaged during this process. The public comment period began on May 3rd and ends on June 3rd, 2024. The public comment period is your opportunity to review the draft interim measures work plan, which was placed at the information repositories previously mentioned. Please mail your comments to the DTSC project manager, Angela Turner, at 5796 Corporate Avenue, Cypress, California, 90630, or you can also email her at Angela Turner, ANGELA.Turner, TURNER, at DTSC.ca.gov. Please ensure your comments are submitted no later than Monday, June 3rd, 2024. We have additionally dropped her email again into the chat box. Slide 26, please. For questions regarding site-specific information, please call Project Manager Angela Turner at 714-484-5477, or you can email her at her email, which we previously listed. For questions regarding public participation activities, please call me at 657-777-9841, or you can email me at Ashley, ASHLEY.Alestra, ALESTRA, at DTSC.ca.gov. For immediate inquiries, please call Public Information Officer Elizabeth Leslie Gassaway at 916-282-8941, or you can email her at Elizabeth, ELIZABETH.Leslie, LESLIE Gassaway, GASSAWAY, at DTSC.ca.gov, which we have also dropped those emails into the chat box. Slide 27, please. Next steps include the following. DTSC will receive comments by both mail and email. DTSC will then respond to the comments in a response to comments document. It will then be mailed to those who have set comments and provided their contact information. Additionally, the document will also be placed on Envirostore database. Based on the comments received, the cleanup plan may be revised. DTSC will then approve a final cleanup plan to which the approved cleanup plan will be implemented. Slide 28, please. This concludes our presentation portion of the webinar. Please check back on our DTSC website for the PowerPoint slideshow, or you can simply click on the chat box below. For a recorded copy of this community meeting, please check back at a later date. I would say approximately 2 to 3 weeks for our media team to get it out there. Now we are going to begin the Q&A portion of this meeting. As previously mentioned, if you would like to send us a question, please click on the Q&A button on the toolbar at the bottom of your screen. You may submit as many questions as you want, However, we do request that you submit one question at a time so that we are able to respond to them adequately. Please note that we will not be taking questions by the chat feature. For those joining by phone, please press *9 to raise your hand to let us know that you have a question. You will then be called on, and when prompted to unmute yourself, please press *6. Okay, so let's begin. We're first going to start with a couple of the questions here in the Zoom queue. And then if anyone in the audience has any questions live, what we're going to do is you guys can go ahead and raise your hand, and then we will then bring the microphone to you so that you can ask your question, and then the panelists up here will answer them. Our first question from our Zoom queue is, could you please share some comprehensive examples of what could happen as a result of these VOCs being in the soil? I know we have some water wells in Santa Ana. Have these seeped into our water?
That is a great question. Thank you for that. Yeah, so the VOC contamination that has come from this facility, as well as several other facilities in the area, has seeped into the ground, and it did reach the groundwater. A lot of work has happened since the early 2000s when Irvine Ranch Water District found, sorry, let me turn my camera back on. Irvine Ranch Water District found some volatile organic compounds in drinking water well number 3, which is southwest of the complex of sites that were shown on the very first map slide earlier. So that started a lot of work at all the sites up gradient of it. So that well has been taken out of service. So that water is no longer being delivered to customers. So the pathway from drinking water to the water receptor is not complete. The water that the city of Santa Ana is delivering, they get from Orange County Water District, who extracts from other groundwater wells in the basin, and they also get some from the aqueduct. They've got a really rigorous set of sampling protocols that they do before they deliver that water so that everyone can be sure that it's safe. But still, it is a resource, so we are interested in cleaning it up, and also interested in preventing other kinds of pathways, such as off-gassing of VOCs. If the chemicals in the groundwater partition into the air and then can infiltrate into buildings, that's not great. Dermal contact with soil is another pathway. And so at each of these facilities, including Embee, where the contamination is found, we do a conceptual site model where what are all of the sources? What are all of the receptors? And what are all the possible connections between the source and the receptor? And we make sure all of those receptors are not complete by doing things like turning off that water well, by doing things like sealing the floor at Embee, things of that nature.
Thank you so much, Angela. The next question that we have in the queue on Zoom is, how long has the contamination been happening for? There are other facilities that do plating in Santa Ana. How much monitoring is taking place today, and will this discovery result in more stringent oversight?
That's a great question. The particular VOCs that are the constituents at this location that we're concerned about are, we call them PCE and TCE. Those were used in the 1960s up until the 1980s, and then use of them stopped and transitioned to other materials. So the releases of PCE and TCE would have stopped 20 some odd years ago. So we're working on cleaning up releases of the past. There are still plating operations there as well as at other facilities. And so those happen under, I think, permit by rule for all of them, which are, those permits are issued by Orange County Healthcare Agency. So they have requirements for how any kind of hazardous materials are stored and quantities that can be on site. They make sure everything's disposed properly. They inspect to make sure that there's compliance with those permits. Also operations that might have air emissions, those pieces of equipment get permitted by the air quality control district. So if they're going to do more stringent oversight in the future, that's probably a conversation we should invite them to. I don't want to get too far out of my lane and accidentally misinform you. But I do know that they are, both of those agencies are participating in the environmental justice type forums that are happening in the community. And so they'll be able to answer those questions.
Thank you, Angela. I would now like to invite the interpreters to inquire if our Spanish-speaking audience would like to ask a question, either in person or virtually. Okay, thank you, Nancy. Thank you, Jesus. Would anyone from our audience like to ask any questions? Please raise your hand if you have any questions in person. If not, we can, oh, we do have a question. Thank you, Jessica.
I think it might have been part of the first question that was asked on Zoom, but I also had this question as well. So what are the health risks that have been found on the evaluations that they mentioned? That's something you're investigating.
Oh, okay. I think, you mean in terms of like symptoms or illness?
Yeah.
I'd like to, thank you for that question. I'd like to, I'd like to invite C.Y. Jang. He's our toxicologist and an expert on these matters to speak about that.
Yes. Yeah, my name is C.Y. Jang. I'm a DTSC toxicologist. Assigned to this project as well as several other sites around this area. So what I do is to look at environmental data connected, from this area, including the site, and assess what we call the potential hazards. We actually did that for in 2015. We looked at the workers and residents, and that's why we should talk about intervention. So some of the intervention or the result of this evaluation, and then in terms of the potential impact to the community. Yeah, it's for me because it's surrounded by other industrial facility and the contamination either in soil or groundwater, in which we already talked about. Groundwater is not used for drinking water. So we don't believe there's any impact to the community from the pollution.
I'm just going to repeat that for the folks on Zoom. The question was, what about the vapors that are volatilized from the cleanup process? Oh, should I answer that? Okay. Sorry, I was, right. So we have the soil vapor extraction to capture the air, and there are pressure monitors to make sure that there is, because air will flow from areas of higher pressure to lower pressure. Kind of like if you blow up a balloon and then you let it go, all the air will leave that balloon and go to where the air pressure is lower. So we want to make sure with this vapor extraction equipment, that the pressure underneath the building is lower than the pressure inside the building. And that'll make sure that air is traveling down as opposed to up. And that way, whatever is in the subsurface doesn't make it into the buildings. And in order to verify that that's working, we'll have a round of indoor air sampling about a month after startup, and then at benchmarks thereafter in the indoor air as well as in the vapor surrounding the treatment zone.
What's the possibility
Okay, the question was, what's the possibility of the vapor getting out? And then would it have any impacts? Well, we have kind of two lines of defense against that to make sure that it doesn't. And then the impacts to indoor users, is that a toxicology question or?
Put the, yeah, there you go.
So go ahead and turn it off.
Yeah.
This way.
What we're gonna do,
Apologies, people.
yeah.
We're making-
What we're gonna do, guys, is when someone in the audience asks a question, whichever panelist is going to be responding, please restate the audience member's question and then respond to it. You're gonna have to sit in Angela's chair because for some reason this is like the good zone. So you're just gonna have to play musical chairs
We were hoping.
or get a little bit closer at least.
It's good.
Yeah.
So I'm
You're
gonna,
good. You're good. Yeah.
I'll unmute this one. Thank you for your patience with us. This is the first time we've done one of these in-person and online meetings at the same time, and we clearly have some wrinkles, but definitely want to get to that really great question. So I'm just going to get out of the seat and let's see why I sit here and address that.
Oh, can you, yeah, can you hear me? Yeah. Okay, so, yeah, one potential pathway, the vapor actually, would, affect, what we call the receptor or human, is actually through what we call the vapor intrusion. So those are really, from subsurface enter the building. All right, so Angela already mentioned that for building at the facility on site, we're actually going to do indoor air to make sure we have proper monitoring data. And then as far as going to the, what we call the outdoor air or ambient air, all right, I guess that's one of your concerns. Again, I'm not an engineer, so I cannot really answer, is the capture using SVE will be, 100% or not. But again, the idea is we will try to capture the vapor while they are at the ground or beneath the ground. And that's where the vapor extraction would actually be effective. So the design is actually not to have the vapor escape above the ground. And again, we will monitor, as I mentioned, the indoor air, and also there are a set of perimeter soil vapor, around this treatment area. And those will give us indication how well the capture of the vapor extraction. And if we found, somehow it doesn't capture all the vapor, then I believe the work plan would actually require shutdown of operation and then make improvement before it restart. The community impact? Okay. So
The question is, what kind of health effects are there from the vapors?
okay. So again, when we do a risk evaluation, there are two important components. One is the toxicity, all right, how bad the chemical, and Angela mentioned that the PCE, DCE, and again, I will be happy to share with you what potential health effects those are. But another important component of the risk evaluation is what we call the exposure assessment. So when we evaluate how likely the vapor will travel to the community, all right, and that's where I think this interim major work plan is trying to design is actually will not have the vapor escape. So basically there would not be exposure, okay, to the community. And because there's no exposure to the community, then, again, there's no health risk.
Let's go ahead and take one more in-person question, and then we're going to switch over to a couple questions via Zoom. So I think you got I think you had your hand up. Go ahead.
Just wondering if it's possible. There was slide in the.
Slide 11.
My name is Australia and I live in the neighborhood north of Delphi. Life Support Neighborhood Association. And I've been a resident for 25 years. And in 2017, we heard that we've been exposed to all these different contaminants. When Rastec was coming into the neighborhood, which is another metal plating company. And so the residents, Michael Park and surrounding neighborhoods like Delphi and Pacific Park and all those, they're organizing after we made the DTSC, they were to find out. What was going on in many companies, just the parents and schools had to go turn. What is the community effect of all this pollution taking place? We were looking particularly to air pollution. But soon after that, we learned that our soil was polluted, our water is polluted, and our air is polluted. And so we wanted to ask, to all of you agencies that we haven't been able to get straight answers. I think it's probably the follow on when you discover or you discover that there's no, I'm sorry, go back to the other one. So we learned that there's also, there's multiple agencies that oftentimes do not provide answers to us because they claim that this is something that happened prior to X, Y, and Z taking on that position, or that's not what we do for business, and then you should point the finger somewhere else. And they do not provide the straight answers to our concerns, which is what happens if my kid has asthma and he's playing at Monroe Elementary, and all of these companies are releasing pollutant into the air. And it's not only one, but we find out there's actually 1,600 AQD permits in the city of Savannah. And we oftentimes get, like you provided, here's our website, you can find more information this. For 3 years, we thought they were just more localized. 22 companies with a special permit to release pollutants into the air. However, we found out later on, that there was actually 1,600 permits for making it throughout the city. And for 3 years, we're looking at the segment of this industrial corridor that extends from the 405 freeway along the 55 freeway to the 5 freeway. And it's the longest industrial corridor in the city. There's other segments in the city that have industrial industry, polluting industry. So for 3 years, we have spent, many hours trying to figure out what kind of permits these 22 companies that we're looking at, between Warner and First Street, were allowed to release, and we wanted to find out when all these 22 companies working next to the schools are releasing the pollutant inside, that impacted the kids' health. And if any of the companies or the industry, the agencies that were there, in sustainable be able to help us understand that. And by looking at your background information, it leaves me a lot of doubts into when you discover there were issues with this diet, how did you discover, and how big was the pollution? What impact did it have on those folks that might be still working there for many years? And so that's sort of answers that we really want to get from you guys in understanding that, because, that will remediation, that create a lot of risk for that. We have a lot of questions, but like for me, I'm looking at, you said there was 650 feet from the residents in, on Standard Avenue. And I'm thinking, that's not a big distance, if there's, in this case, I mean, how should it be that these vapors or whatever, that the soil and the water are contaminated and stay there? Right? And then, so how much of this pollution is releasing to the soil and the water? For how long? Because I look at the guy, I mean, you didn't even mention the names of the pollutants. I haven't seen any of those names. Oh, I heard you say VOCs, considered chromium, but there's nothing in there that tells me this is how we discovered the contamination here in Avenue. And how many years into that discovery happened that it is going to be treated. You haven't said anything about the length of time that's going to take to clean up place. And whether this proposal is going to work or not. The question still remains to the community. How concerned should we be about this cleanup? Because I know there's not only cleanup of water. And forward to the airplane company also that same contamination. But then also my concern when I attended that public hearing, the maps have enough more information into how extended was the contamination to the surrounding industry. I didn't see that there. And in that case, in the Pomona Avenue, the contamination and the surrounding industry was higher than the site itself. And so wonder if you already finished up the cleanup, what happened to the surrounding pollution? It's still there. Sadly, I guess the Pomona is a very good place that has been there for a long time. And it makes you wonder, those waiters and the cooks have been exposed to all this time for so many years. Is the food contaminated? All this concerns that we do have, that by attending so many meetings, we don't have answers. We don't get answers to all concerns. And that's something that I worry about. I'm now, in Medicare, so I wonder if some of these issues that I have now with my lungs and stuff, is that I'm smoking all this stuff, that living here for so long, and some of these issues. So we would like to have some answers about that. Like how many cleanup sites do we have here in the neighborhood in this industrial corridor? And this one is, it's 150 feet from their homes on Standard Avenue. But what about the ones that are close to the schools? What about the ones that are closer to home? So, another question that maybe some comments, because going back to what you sent me to this website, on the reports, I'm not what's it called, a lot of times I don't know what you're referring to. And so if you don't make it a simple language that I can understand, it will be really hard for the community to get a sense of what's going on.
Sure.
Yeah, so I just want to make sure that we're answering all of your questions and you have a lot in there. So can you repeat for people online?
Yes. Oh, did the online folks not hear that?
Yeah, I just want to make sure.
Thank you to our Zoom audience. We appreciate your patience. We were receiving comments from in-person audience. Angela will now repeat some of the questions and then we will respond to them so that everyone can be listening in. Thank you so much.
Okay, so the questions that I heard that were specific to Embee was for more detailed information about the nature and extent of contamination in the various media, and the level of detail in the presentation. So the level of detail that we put into these is kind of carefully calibrated. We do our best to give you enough that you understand what's going on, but not so much that it's overwhelming with alphabet soup of acronyms that you need a degree like CY has to understand. So if you're looking for a deeper dive into those concentrations of what's in soil vapor and groundwater and what are the names of the chemicals, we can absolutely provide that. We have all that information. So did you want to get to the not Embee specific parts, or there were also part of the question? Oh, I'm sorry. Do I need to start over? The microphone was muted. So then there were other parts to the question that were more kind of overarching into like the community and various facilities. I was at the Madison Park meeting last week, that was attended by lots of different agencies as well as Cali PA. And I felt like that was a great place to have a conversation about those kinds of issues, because they've got so many different aspects that are handled by different agencies, and getting everybody together in a room is a great forum to have that kind of conversation. I can't really speak on behalf of AQMD and like public health agencies. I do cleanups. And so I don't want to say that's not my lane, because I know that's super, super unsatisfying to hear, but I don't want to step outside of my area of expertise and tell you something that's wrong on accident.
Yeah, but you know, if you use and you got that representative sample based on the state responses along with that. I don't think that is the representative sample. Maybe come with availability, you know, just work with you know, when you send the survey, we're going to I mean, more with the parents and being able to get, you know, good response and like, see those people in the Zoom. This is Spanish, you know, we're going to follow up on that. And that, you know, our community is not like that kind of process, especially there's a lot of our communities refer to Medicaid in Spanish. And so, yeah, you know, I was hesitant to come to this meeting because I need more questions than answers. And it's, but I think it is important that we are present here. And to educate the community and address the community concern.
Yeah, so I can share with you who got the survey. I don't know if you can see this on Zoom. We can put this in the chat, but we have a 1/4-mile radius from the complex of sites that DTSC is working on that we were asked to come out and give the community updates on, and those did get sent out in English as well as in Spanish. And the community update got sent out in English and in Spanish. We're completely happy to share email updates as well. We shared our email updates with the Delhi Neighborhood Association, with the city of Santa Ana. If you have any other contacts that would be interested, we'd love to add them to our email distribution list. We show up at a community, like neighborhood association meetings as we're invited. We're completely open to ideas of how to get engaged with the community and hear these kinds of questions and answer them for you in a level of detail that you're looking for. Those are answers that we have and we can totally give to you. Oh, to the Q&A slide, sure. There we go.
Thank you, Angela.
Sure.
We're going to switch over to a couple of Zoom questions. One question is, can you share a link to the report that covers Angela's earlier description of water lines being shut down.
We'll make sure to send it.
Yeah, I can find a citation for that and share that.
Wonderful, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Kim. We will make sure that we are able to share a link with that. If you could please email Angela to her email at angela.turner@dtsc.ca.gov. She can have your email and then she can email you that report. Thank you so much. Next question is, where will the soil waste go? To a facility in Santa Ana?
I do not know of any facilities in Santa Ana that handle that kind of waste, so my answer would be no. The soil will be sampled for all of the constituents of concern at the site. And based on the results of that sample, that will determine what classification it has, and it'll have to go somewhere where that waste can be handled. For example, if there are organic contaminants in it, but not heavy metals, then maybe it might go for thermal treatment. There's a facility in Azusa that does that. If it does have heavy metals, then those aren't treated by thermal remediation. So it would have to go to a class of landfill that has the structure appropriate to handle that safely. So it really just depends on how that characterization happens.
Thank you, Angela.
Sure.
What are the worst case associated air pollution risks to workers and adjacent communities? What are the risks associated with discharge to OC sewers?
The air pollution risks, so with, I'm thinking that is referring to fugitive emissions from the VOCs that are getting liberated from the soil and groundwater and then into the vadose zone and then possibly into the atmosphere or indoor air. I don't know about worst case scenario, but we do have, oh, here comes CY with thoughts that are probably smarter than mine.
Yeah, so again, these are all legitimate questions. And I think the concern is also, valid. What we do is the cleanup. All right. So in this case, again, we are here for this cleanup plan. And yeah, I think it's important to think of this, and Angela mentioned about it in situ. All right. So when we say in situ, so basically all the contamination, we try to treat is below the surface, and the capture of the vapor. Again, the design is try to capture that below the surface. Okay, so as far as the cleanup concerned, yeah, I think there will be minimum impact to the air quality, if any. Okay, and then I think the second part of.
I can reread the question for
Okay,
you.
sure, thank you.
So the full question was, what are the worst case associated air pollution risks to workers and adjacent communities? Second part of the question is, what are the risks associated with just discharge to Orange County sewers?
Oh, okay. That part.
So the material wouldn't get discharged to the sewers until it had gone through a treatment system. So it would go through a canister that has aqueous carbon in it. And so the volatile organic compound molecules would stick to adhesion sites on the surface of that carbon and then exit that carbon without the VOCs in it. That carbon would get changed out by a vendor periodically, and then the carbon goes to a facility that regenerates it, usually by thermally. They would heat it until the VOCs are destroyed and then recycle that carbon for use again. So there wouldn't be risks from the water in the sewer because that wouldn't have VOCs in it.
Thank you, Angela. So we're gonna switch gears here and go ahead to our live audience. Please raise your hand if you have a question.
So I have a couple of more operational type of questions. You found place soils. which tend to hold good and bad chemicals quite well. Also, do you have any idea what the depth of the water table in the area is? Because that's another thing that Southern Santa Ana has, is a very high water table. And it's kind of a two-part question. You know, what is the depth of that water table? And then what are the chances of leaching through the soil? Because the water table actually travels through clay bed. So to actually expand the contaminant.
Go ahead and repeat the question first.
Okay, so the question was about the groundwater table and how deep it is and the clay soils that can retain chemicals and the risk of leaching to groundwater from soils that are above the water table. So yes, the clay soils can purge water locally, really shallow. Like we've seen after it rains, it'll daylight in the gutter as Ms. Duran experienced in the Evergreen neighborhood. And then in those areas where there's not enough clay to perch it, then it's deeper, I want to say 60 feet to like, 20.
Very high water.
Right,
So
right,
we're during the storms last year, we're in area 6.
right, right. So the idea of doing the thermal remediation to get that VOC mass out of the soil so that it doesn't leach to the groundwater is very much the intent of this whole thing, is that sure, we don't want it in the soil because it's a risk there, but we really don't want it leaching into the groundwater because of the impacts to the wells downstream. So it's kind of a part of each facility that's overlying that groundwater plume is doing their own thing to within their borders. And then the Orange County Water District has got an overall strategy that's more basin wide, that's kind of a catcher's mitt to get the residuals and things from that have gone off site from unknown locations. And so as a system, hopefully we've got the whole thing covered.
And then the rhetorical part of my question is, how deep is the treatment for the extraction? How deep, because some are going in an angle, some are straight down. How deep are you treating?
Well, I've got a slide for that, I think, that I had in case of that question. Yeah, so I'm looking at slide 35. Can I go to full screen with this so that I can see that? Is that zooming in? Oh, there we go. So this electrode goes down to 45 feet and some of them go down to 60. And then that's vertical. So the hypotenuse of that triangle would be longer, if that makes sense. And then here's the water table up here at 20. And then the soil vapor extraction portion up here. Yes, yes, that is in the slide presentation. Or we can add that one in the in the online resource. Sure.
Thank you to our Zoom audience.
Hi there, just a quick question on slide 9 and then some comments. Slide 9 shows Embee, but it shows a variety of other businesses, Cherry Aerospace. Are there Embee, SoCo West, etc.? Are there concerns, similar concerns with all of those other facilities in any manner of air and water, VOC contamination? Because we're going to be talking about Embee today.
Yeah.
So of course it leaves a whole world of questions on, okay, what's going on with those? Are they being addressed? And why just Embee? Have we even dove into those problems? So I'll let you start with that.
Sure, absolutely. Yes. So we are focusing on Embee today. Oh, sorry. Thank you. Thank you. The question was about the other facilities that you can see on slide 9, and have they been investigated? Are measures being taken there the way that they are at Embee? And the answer is yes. Each of these is an open case with DTSC. These are Glade Chemical has got a pump and treat groundwater system that's been operating since the 90s. Dyson has done a soil removal. They have still got some more work to do. Cherry Aerospace has done quite a bit of assessment. They have got a soil vapor extraction system running, and they're currently in the permitting process for installation of a pump and treat system. I know we have more activities going on at SoCo West and Diesel Logistics. I'm less up on those details because I don't personally manage those. I manage the other 4. And then we've got the measures that we talked about at Embee. So we're here talking about Embee because we're in the process of approving that specific work plan, but there is a whole universe of things going on at the other sites as well. And I can give updates on any of those. I think it's been a few months now since I've come out to one of the Delhi Association meetings to talk about those. So if it's about time that I do that again, I'm happy to.
Okay, and then I wanted to. I'm here at the Delhi Center.
Okay.
These are our friends and partners, the Delhi Neighborhood Association. I just want to reiterate that gentleman's question, try as he may, did not get answered, right? Of what exactly are the health risks, but I understand that you are here to present to us the cleanup effort. So perhaps when we allow you to use space at the Delhi Center, we make sure that the Orange County Healthcare Agency is here, because we can't have this meeting and then walk away, like I was saying, frustrated because half of our questions aren't answered. So perhaps when we agree to address these issues, we make sure, like you said, like was said, that in other meetings, there were other players there that were more, that was their lane, as you say. So I just want to reiterate that he asked the question many times. The gentleman asked the question, what are the concerns for the community? And it couldn't be answered. And I understand that. I respect that this is your lane. You're explaining the cleanup process, but there's a whole other part, as Jose was mentioning, that continues to be a mystery. So maybe we will do better next time and say, sure, you can use our space, who's coming? And let's invite people that can, address all of the questions so that we leave not as frustrated or not more confused than we will.
Well, I definitely don't want you to leave frustrated. And I am trying to pinpoint the portion of the question that wasn't answered about the health risk. Was it about the harms associated with each individual chemical that wasn't? Was the portion of your question that wasn't covered, was that like specific to like the individual chemicals and then the health problems that are associated with those chemicals? I want to understand which. Mm-hmm.
the 50%, 45%.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, our goal is to. Okay, so
for Zoom audience, thank you so much. We
See if I can-
appreciate your patience. Zoom.
It was a question of, so the system is designed to capture the vapors, but what if they don't? And then what would the subsequent risk to the community be? So that, I mean, the system is designed to capture all of them. And so like 100%. if, I mean,
You test them to make sure that it's not sharing 100%.
we monitor the pressures, as we mentioned, so that we know that across the distribution of the treatment, that we have air that's flowing from the surface down and not from the subsurface up, because that's going to keep the chemicals from coming in contact with people. And so with that much vacuum getting applied, the fugitive emissions are going to be way less than doing nothing. The basis of comparison is, what if you do nothing? It's going to be better than that, better than what's there today.
We don't know at all.
Mhm. Mhm.
We'll take that on the next.
So, if I could try for the second.
This way.
We know, we have noise in the ground, and we know.
It won't.
Sure, here. Can you please sit where Angela's sitting? Because it's not gonna pick it up on Zoom. The audience won't be able to hear you guys via Zoom. Yeah, this is perfect right here.
So we know we have mass in the ground, and we roughly know where the boundaries of that mass is. And the treatment is gonna target that mass, and we're gonna monitor around it, the vapor. And when we vacuum the vapor out of the ground, it gets treated, and before it's discharged to the air, it will be tested and meets the air quality standards before it gets discharged to the air. Now, is it conceivable that something might escape? It's extremely unlikely, and we try everything we can to make sure nothing migrates towards the community. We have monitoring around the vapor cloud or the contamination.
She can repeat the question.
I don't think I got the question.
I'm saying in this sense, the same question that I have asked, I don't think it's been answered because there hasn't been any issues. Without any treatment. And so it makes sense that there will be no conflicts.
Mhm. Okay, so the question is, what are the health risks currently before the thermal system is going in, and CY is coming over to handle that question?
Yeah. Again, no, this is a good question. And sometimes, I get too technical but sometimes probably not technical enough to address some of your concern. So when we do nothing, all right, vapor and the VOC, volatile organic compound, they pretty much sit in the soil. They're organic matter that will absorb some of the compound and what we call the vapor phase. And they really just move by what we call diffusion. Okay, diffusion is simple terms. All right, like if you have a really high level of a chemical, it will move to where there's lower level. But this diffusion process is very slow, and also it will not go too far. Like when we look at, for example, I mentioned about this vapor intrusion into a building, usually the rule of thumb is 100 feet. So if your vapor is 100 feet or further away from the building, then this diffusion, okay, is not going to get there, fast enough or large enough to have any impact to, that building. And for ambient air, it's kind of similar. It goes through this process, and a small amount may diffuse up to the air. Is that right? But the thing about the ambient air is there's a lot of dilution. That's why when we look at vapor, the first thing we look at is actually occupants inside the building. Okay, and we do at some facility we have like ambient air monitoring, and we done a lot of those. Even at highly contaminated site, and usually in terms of chemical of concern, what we could measure in the ambient air is either very low or not detected. It's just because that's the nature. Okay. So and again, I don't want to downplay the significance of this, but in terms of health risk, yeah, there are certain pathways we feel it will pose potentially higher risk than other exposure pathway. And usually we start by monitoring soil vapor. All right, that's another thing we mentioned. All right, we monitor soil vapor around the treatment area. If we start seeing like elevated soil vapor, because when you do the in situ treatment thermal, you will actually accelerate the vapor, volatilization. All right, and that's why we want to do this additional monitoring. And if we see high level in soil gas, then yeah, we have to revisit. All right, like I mentioned, there are contingency that maybe we have to shut down the treatment first, see if, like you say, is 5% or 10% escape, and if so, like how can we do that? And the other thing we can do is we can also monitor ambient air at that point. All right, make sure nothing escapes. So there are a couple of things we can do, and again, the design is supposed to capture 100%, but we do agree, in maybe unlikely event, if it escape, then we would have additional, measures to address that.
Does that answer?
So-
And I feel like I'm still gonna
I'd like to know the risks associated with the chemicals that you could potentially come across. That's a question? Okay.
So if I can add to what she was talking about, we're talking about an area that is impacted. There's mass in the ground and there is a defined area. We know where that mass is. If you put the building up at the top of it, then the risk becomes from vapor coming from under the building into the building. That's the risk we're talking about. It's not the ambient. So if that's why we monitor around the property boundary to make sure nothing going towards the homes. And if we detect, if we have elevated concentrations at the property boundary, then we ask to go inside homes and test inside homes. There are many areas where we go inside homes if we go to a boundary of a facility or a property and there are elevated concentrations.
Right. Gotcha. Right. Okay. So the question was about the specific health consequences of exposure, like, for example, asthma or cancer or things like that. And that's kind of what I was getting at with the health conditions associated with the chemical. And we have fact sheets on TCE and PCE that we can share with you. And CY, I don't know, do you want to talk a little bit about the cancer and non-cancer risks associated with TCE and PCE?
Yeah, sure. For these type of VOCs, usually the short-term concern is like, your like breathing, right? If it's really high concentration, and usually it's in the occupational setting, like people actually work with this solvent. They may have like, irritation and, and even like, some of the breathing difficulty. But for the environmental setting, when we look at this, usually we consider lower level exposure and PCE and TCE, they will cause some like kidney and liver. These are the main organs they will affect, and also the central nervous system. This is what we usually call the adverse health effect. They are also either probable or known carcinogen, meaning causing cancer. Again, their target organ are usually the liver or kidney, and sometimes like bladder. So yeah, certain chemical, they only really affect certain organs. So it really depending on, but again, I'm not a medical doctor and we are not a health agency, so we really cannot give health advice. But yeah, what we can do is actually take this environmental data and actually estimate what we call the potential health risk, both cancer and non-cancer. And we did do that, all right, for Embee and surrounding facility based on the data. But for Embee, because it's away from the residential area, so really we did not predict the risk for like neighborhood, but we do predict the potential risk for on-site worker and potential on-site resident. So if that's the information you are interested, I will be more than happy to pass that information to you and we can have further conversations. And hopefully this time, I address your concern.
Fantastic. Thanks for bearing with us.
I have a couple questions. So I do want to point out that part of the California Air Resource Board does state that hexchrome is a known carcinogen that is not at any levels safe for humans to be around, according to their website, and that was stated in 1986. I also want to point out that last year in May of 2023, they their goal is to phase out hexchrome completely by I believe it was 2036, if I recall. So my question is, why are we doing these plans if they're focusing on phasing out hexchrome, because it's a known carcinogen that has no safe levels known to humans, and there's many facilities out on Riverside that are being closed down and being phased out, and they're using a hexavalent chromium. I'm sorry, no, that's not being now. There's an alternative that they're being phased out to use. So why aren't we pushing and planning to do the same? If all these other facilities are doing that. And I also wanted to ask, last year in September, there was a survey done that only had a 30-day period. Why are these surveys only 30 days long? Why do we only have 30 days to respond to these? If it's the same facility, because it's different addresses, but it's all going to be plating, because I can see that it's very large. Why don't we just do one survey that's multiple months long, because we're working families. We obviously don't have access to digital forms and surveys, so it's very difficult for our residents to complete these surveys. And not only that, I do want to comment that the way you present these surveys is very difficult to digest and understand. We've had these conversations before. I don't think that the surveys convey the urgency of what these cleanup sites are. I want to see like red flags. I want to see a list of what these carcinogens or what other pollutants and the health effects associated with them are, so that the residents know the sense of urgency that we have with these cleanup sites. And then knowing that Embee plating has been violating or having these violations for decades now, why are they continuing to allow to operate in our community? That is definitely a major concern and a red flag to me. We've had these conversations before in the past. It is a little disappointing that the surveys were kicked out for so long. I don't really understand what the point of that is. And again, I think that 30 days is not sufficient enough for us to get surveys. Obviously, the numbers tell you that.
This is a city of over 300,000 residents, so that's not even 10%. So I think that a time period that's larger is definitely what you need to do, and I think that we need to focus on having campaigns where you really involve the community, such as Madison Neighborhood Association, Delhi Neighborhood Association, the Delhi Center. I think you guys really need to utilize your resources a little more in the city, because we have a great network of community resources, something that we saw during COVID. We really came together as community resources, and we brought a lot of resources to the city, because we know our residents. So we're letting you know that, for one, the communication is not there, the transparency is not there, and I think that just creating maybe reaching out and having points of contact within these neighborhood associations and centers, so that you have like a set email list of, hey, we're doing an event here. Let's let all these folks know. I don't know if you want to call them ambassadors. I don't know what you want to call it, but I think you guys really need to create like a network, because like I said, we have the resources, we have the network, we just need to tap into it a little bit better, so that we can get more awareness, because this is when we let residents know what's going on, they're extremely concerned. They're extremely concerned because, like everybody was saying, we have known health effects. There's cancer in my neighborhood, there's asthma. It's things that we know are environmental, and we've been saying that they've been environmental. So, and I know that this might not be your agency, but like last week you saw at that stakeholder meeting, there's a real lack of accountability, and it's just a lot of like pointing fingers back and forth. Like, that's not my agency, that's that agency, and then, well, that's not our department. You know what I mean? So it's great that you're coming out to the community, but I think that we want to see you not doing just the bare minimum, because it feels like that's what you're doing. You're just kind of like, okay, well, we did what we were supposed to do, and our job is done here, which is all fine and dandy, but these are our lives and our livelihoods, our children's livelihoods. So I just really want to emphasize that, just really tap into the resources.
I can actually answer the first part of the question. Thank you so much for your questions and your comments. I appreciate it. Oh, thank you so much for your questions and comments. I can take the first half of that. So just to answer your first part of the question was, why do we have a 30-day, approximately a 30-day session? So that is just to have a start and an end of when we can know to start building this community profile for the community to be getting more information. The reason why we start very early into the process, so as we had shown up on the slideshow previously, the mail out went out in like September about. So that's just basically when we started. We started sending out these community surveys way in advance. So the reason for these surveys is actually to gauge community interest, to kind of see, okay, like how much of the community is interested in this, pick up like languages that are needed, concerns, questions, that kind of thing. And so, yeah, and then also just to see if people are interested in community meetings like this, right? So this survey is sent out way before any of the investigation has even really started. So at this point in the stage when we're sending these surveys out, we don't know really anything about these sites. The soil samples haven't been collected. Nothing's really been done yet. As for the 30 days thing, we're not limited to 30 days. That's just like a general cutoff. If anyone wants to respond later, I can tell you I've received countless surveys. I get them late all the time. We still take that data and put it into our community profile. So actually, I would say probably like almost half of the responses that we received were received like a month after the cutoff date kind of thing. So that is reflected adequately. Even if we get like a survey super late, we'll still include that in our data. We're always updating it. So please feel free to contact us at any point if you are interested in, or you have like more questions or concerns. Our email or our phone lines are always available. And because we understand everyone is working very hard, and sometimes it's hard to like, people go out of town for work or whatever. reach out to us whenever, and we'd be happy to answer those questions for you. And then as far as getting people involved, so we've actually been involved with Delhi with our EJ team for like our environmental justice team for like a while. We started an early conversation with them very early in the very early stages of this project. However, when we had inquired to Delhi Center for community leaders, in addition to the key contacts and like government officials and that kind of thing, we actually never heard back. So we had waited, I think it was like at least a couple months. It was a couple months, we didn't hear anything. We had followed up, that kind of thing. We didn't get a response, unfortunately, because we wanted to stay involved and we wanted to be able to reach out to these key leaders that you were referring to, like homeowners associations. We got like a couple different people, but we never received like a list that we were kind of looking for. We did our best to try within the surrounding area, get like schools, fire departments, police departments, daycares, elderly facilities, kind of things like that with people that have like sensitive receptor kind of information. But unfortunately, we didn't receive like any answers from the community as far as who else we should be reaching out to. This was like a couple months ago. I had emailed Christine. So we never received back the leader community list, the mailing list. Okay, please. Thank you.
But yeah, since we've been coming out over the last like year, so we've met folks like Margarita Macedonio and started conversations with more folks, and the outreach kind of gets a little farther every time. Every time we have some kind of an engagement event, we kind of accrue new people, which is great, and I hope that continues. If you have any suggestions for additional ways to cascade those things, we're all ears. A couple of the plater things that you mentioned, carb phasing out the hexchrome, and I just learned about that last week at the MPNA meeting. Those forums that get all the agencies together are so useful. I learned a lot from the other folks who were there, but we're doing the cleanup because of the use in the past. And so it was used in the past and it was released into the environment. And so like the use of the PCE and TCE, that was finished in the 80s. They haven't used it for 20 some odd years, but it's still in the ground. And so we're going to come out and address it so that it's not a health risk. Were there other parts that I wanted to get to with that? I know there was a lot in your question, and thank you for sharing your thoughts. It's
also too, I was gonna say if you're aware of any other people that could be interested, we would really love that information because we are always updating our mailing list. So we would be happy to collect that data if you want to send me an email or talk to me afterwards. That would be super helpful so that we can add that to our mailing list. Thank you so much.
The last question, I encourage you guys to follow up any emails. Angela actually really responsive, so please, reach out to them. You'll be able to any additional help you have. So this is
Let me make the Zoom announcement. Thank you to our Zoom audience for staying engaged. We will be taking our last question this evening in person. If you have additional questions and you have not provided your email in the Q&A feature, please do so now. And we will send you an email with the answer to your questions. And if it's after the presentation and you think of more questions, we would still love to hear from you. So please email either me or Angela at our emails that we have in the chat box, and we will get back to you as soon as we can. Thank you so much.
So I have two questions. The first one is, so is there a reason the meeting was in the middle of the comment period? Because everybody only uses about 2 weeks to provide actual informal comments. It doesn't give us a full 30 days to provide informal comment. what's going on. And then the second question is, I keep seeing that it's an interim plan, and that another one was done, I don't know how many years ago. Why is it an interim plan, and what is the final plan to completely clean this place? Because based on your timeline, it's been contaminated at least 20 years that we know of.
Mhm.
And that is, they include, as you said, chemicals and uses. So why hasn't there been a final cleanup plan, been processed in that, eliminate the contamination?
So do I need to repeat that for Zoom?
Yeah, just please repeat the question for Zoom purposes.
So, two parts. The first part was, why is the meeting in the middle of the comment period? So, the period of the duration that remains in the comment period is, roughly 15 days, and might be tough for folks to make, responses. Are you muted? The second half was, I'm sorry. Oh, the timeline. Why is this an interim cleanup plan and not like a comprehensive be all end all cleanup plan? So yeah, the comment period is 30 days, and it gets noticed at the beginning of it, and we give people a couple weeks notice of this meeting happening, because if we send out the notice and then the meeting happens on day one, you don't have enough time to kind of plan your life to carve out the time to get here. You have a couple of weeks to look at the online resources if you want to, so that you can come with questions. And then we have the meeting, and then there are another couple weeks after that to prepare any kind of comments that you want included. And like Ashley said, we accept late comments all the time. And even if the period is over and the responsiveness summary has already been published and gone out, we'd still love to hear from you. It might not make that document, but we absolutely want to be engaged in that process with you. And then the interim measures. So the interim measures are kind of focused on one constituent in one media, kind of one pathway. The comprehensive cleanup plan at the end of all this is going to be made up of all of the interim measures that went along the way, maybe an additional one to do the last task that remains on that in that iterative process. It'll probably also include any kind of operation and maintenance that's required for any kind of structures or sampling or processes that are involved in those interim measures. And it'll include a land use restriction that is attached to the deed of the property that requires that those restrictions get met going on into the future. Even if the property sells to a different person who redevelops it, as long as that contamination is in place, that land use restriction will run with the land and will continue to apply to any future new owners. So the interim nature might sound like it's a Band-Aid, but it's not. It's a legitimate component of a remedy that will eventually, as we get through these iterations, cover all of the pathways, all of the media, everything.
So just, you asked why the meeting is in the public comment period. So short answer to that is because we're required to. So we have to have it during that time. We try to plan it towards the later part of the public comment period to give us some time to do that. But sometimes with community spacing, and planning and stuff like that, that doesn't always happen. But we try in our best to basically get that information to you sooner. We try to publish things in the newspaper prior to the public comment period so that you can do that. But like Angela said, if you guys ever have any questions, please reach out. We're happy to discuss things with you. If you guys want an additional meeting or something like that, we could plan something. So, we are receptive. So we appreciate all your comments, concerns. We do take them seriously. We know that this is your lives. We live in communities on our own, and we understand that, right? So, and especially with the cancer rates becoming higher and higher as time goes on, it seems. So we understand the severity of it. So the more you reach out, the more that we can give. So please reach out.
Okay.
All right, due to time, unfortunately, that is all the time that we have here today.